All right. Well, I wanted to welcome everyone today to the Agile at Scale SIG for April and sharing my screen now. So hopefully everybody can see the presentation. I'll get it into slideshow mode. And so yeah, for those of you who this is the first time you're joining an Agile Austin meetup, our mission is to connect people and foster professional growth through collaborative events, which educate our community. And, on a more personal note, I've been involved with the organization for well over a decade, learned so much in that time. And so I really believe it embodies the principles that align with this mission. So our 2022-2023 board members, I am CTO, and you can see here the rest of the board. Our term is actually coming up here in the next couple months. We send a newsletter out with information on how you can apply for the board. We also have information on the website. I'll post some links towards the end if you're interested in applying to become a member of the board. We'd love to have you. We'll definitely have a vacancy for at least our vice president position, and anybody is welcome to run for the others. So we are, of course, available at board@agileaustin.org. So let me make sure that we've got folks muted. So okay, moving on, then we have sponsors. So our platinum sponsor retrospectives has a great retrospective tool you can check out. Post some links towards the end of the session with all of our sponsor information. WellSky, Meliora Coaching, 321 Gang. We're all very thankful for them because they make events like this possible and free for our members as well as folks that aren't members. So if you're interested in becoming a sponsor, please email contact@agileaustin.org. And membership includes discounts on book club, for example, and other benefits as well throughout the course, and discounts on conference tickets, which we don't have anything to announce on that front just yet, but we are in the planning stages for another Keep Austin Agile conference, which we've been doing for over a decade now. We also have plenty of meetups, coaching this Agile at Scale SIG, Lean Kanban leaders, Scrum Master, looking to also kick off a product SIG here, hopefully in the next few months with another one of our local area product leaders. So we're also looking for a co-lead on that if you're interested in it as well. And then about this specific SIG, so Leland Newsom started it in 2016. I don't think he's going to be able to join us today, but I believe he's on the road. I joined in 2020 to help him out in such situations where he can't join us. And so we're both passionate Agilists, and we really just love helping out the community. So I have some contact information for us here at the end if you want to check it out later on. But upcoming SIGs, May of 2023, Leland is looking to potentially line up another speaker, but is also considering talking about what's new in SAFe 6.0. So be on the lookout for that meetup invite here pretty soon. Meetup.com/Agile Austin if you haven't joined to sign up for our events. We're also looking for speakers for June and July. So if you have a topic you're interested in and the Agile at Scale area, then feel free to reach out to us. And again, contact information coming up shortly. But today I wanted to just briefly mention we have Eric Lessard, who will be talking about create art flow with safe Kanban teams. So and this is version 6.0. So we've got a little bit more information on version 6.0 coming up today. And so, yeah, thanks for coming. That's our contact information, Leland Newsom at agileaustin.org or ben.rogers@agileaustin.org. We'll be happy to sort you out with any questions you have. If you have topics for upcoming SIGs or anything else you want to chat about, feel free to reach out to us. So with that, I am going to pass the screen share over to Eric, and he can begin his presentation. So thanks, Eric, and take it away.
And I'll just be sharing my screen. Make sure I get my layout right. Chat. Just make sure I can see. Okay, so hi everybody, welcome to Agile Austin Agile at Scale conferences. Can you see my screen? Just please confirm in the chat everything's working properly. Looks good, excellent. Okay, so today's presentation, Achieving Art Flow with Kanban Teams. This is a presentation that I've delivered before, but it was with version safe 5.1. So there are updates to take into account new changes to safer version 6.0. So I'm introduce myself. I'm Eric Lessard, Director Consulting Expert at CGI, SPCT candidate, Enterprise Agile Coach, and I am helping organization implement agility at scale, working with senior leaders in both private sector and public sector as well. I like to kick off this presentation with a quote from Don Reinertson. So in the product development, our greatest waste is not unproductive engineers, but work products sitting idle in process queues. Okay, so that's what we're really after when we want to create flow is not to make sure that people are as busy as possible, but to make sure that we do not have valuable pieces of work that are sitting on the shelf and are not in the hands of their consumers. Starting also with Kanban, we'll be defining the Kanban at the team level. That's the one definition we will use for the teams that are contributing to the flow in the art. So the team Kanban method is a way that helps team facilitate the flow of value by visualizing their workflow, establishing work in progress limits, measuring throughputs, and continuously improving their process. And think of it as a game, okay? Most of the time people try to reduce Kanban as just having a board and having cards moving around the board. Think of it as a system, just like a game, a board game. You don't just buy pieces of cardboard. You have the rules, you have the system, you have the pieces, you have everything. So think of it that way. So when you're talking about team level Kanban, you're talking about the game of running a Kanban system as a team, with the different pieces that you have with their team backlog, how they plan together, user boards, and align with the art. And also we'll be talking about flow today. So we'll look into the properties of a flow system. We'll refer to those from time to time. And this is the common properties for any flow system, okay? Not only in SAFe, you basically have a process with work in progress in your system. And that means that your system is busy delivering value. You also, in your process, you may have bottlenecks where the work doesn't flow as fast as the rest of the system. That could create queues in the system. You also have different hands-off between different parts of the system. That's fairly common in a flow process. You have the feedback loop to make sure that the work that you deliver is fit for purpose. You also have the batch size, so how much work does flow through the system as a single piece of work, the different policies, and also the workers who help the work move forward. Those teams, they join the art. And what we do expect from a Kanban team joining the art is to help the art plan, help the art integrate, and help the art improve. So those are the contribution in which the Kanban team will be creating flow, not only at their level, but at the art level as well. So planning with Kanban teams. So what does it entail? Entering PI planning for your art and have Kanban teams also playing their part within that PI planning as well. There are two inputs that they will be looking for. First, it would be the service level agreement and the different information regarding their throughput, and also how they will put together PI objectives as their output to the PI planning. Service level agreement, the shortest definition that we can get from that term is, when will it be done? That is what the consumer of the work is actually asking when they're asking about the SLA. And the SLA, the service level agreement, has two components in it. In fact, three. What is the product or service offered? What is the waiting time in days elapsed? And a level of confidence on which you will meet that commitment. So for a single system, you may have even multiple SLAs and start to think of it more as a range than an actual value. So for one particular Kanban team, you may have an SLA of 7 days, which has a 50% chance of being met. 12 days, that would have 70% chance being met, and 85 and 60 days, then that one would have an 85% level confidence. And why I mean discussing about the range, because having those different value actually share with your different partners the spread of different elapsed time that they might wait for the piece of work. And you might ask, why not only sharing one single value for the SLA? In fact, what is really useful with the idea of sharing ranges is that you actually help the consumer plan on their side and see for themselves if the work is completed in advance, how likely is it to be, and how they can adjust for it. Okay, so that means that when you are working with those ranges, you're actually creating a competitive advantage if the consumer has a way to leverage that gain in cycle time and flow time to the advantage of the total flow time. Okay, so that's for sure. And you also know how much you're at risk if you commit to an aggressive date with a lower confidence level. So that's one great way you can help the planification of work at the art level. When you are entering PI planning as a Kanban team, you break down your work items according to your SLA. Okay, what that means is, if you commit to a 7 days SLA, you do not precisely estimate your work items, but you rather break them down until you are highly confident that they will meet the agreed SLA. Okay, so that's something that's really, really important. And that way you save a lot of time on estimation. So you do right sizing estimate. And when you are collaborating with other teams, each of the work items that are required for other teams, then you use the SLA so that they can plan their work accordingly. And yourself, you may see how early you need to work on this item so that it meets the client expectation. When it comes to the amount of work that you can get out during the PI planning, you can use your throughput history, okay, your flow velocity in Save 6. And that way you can see how far you can dig into your backlog to complete work items. And if you want to work with ranges as well, but for batches of items, you can use Monte Carlo simulations, which can be really useful and give meaningful prediction that you can use for your planning efforts. So this is one example from a tool that's called Actionable Agile. What does it do is it takes as an input history from your past backlog, and based on that history, the tool will do a sampling of throughput on different dates, and will use that to simulate different scenarios on how well you might be doing based on your history to complete those work items. So in this simulation, you have a fixed date, and you're actually asking the system performing sampling and calculation how much item you will deliver, what would be your throughput, your flow velocity, and also a range of different throughputs for your forecast. So you can then see how far you're going down in your backlog, and also how you can commit to batches of items rather than only commit to single item themselves.
Hey, Eric, it looks like we got a question from Max. Max, what you got?
Yes, I mean, if that's okay to ask questions, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes. So on that throughput charts, the
Yes.
quick question was, the throughput is based on what? Is it story points, hours worked? What exactly?
Item count.
Item count. So just, and then you kind of assume that each of the items are exactly the same size.
We assume that the items are sized to meet the SLA.
Yes. Okay. So they are similar, right? Across the
Yes.
board. Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. And then you would have, is the expectation of the team, this Kanban team, that they come out of PI and they have a bunch of items that are already planned out to do?
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Another example of simulation over here, when in that case you have a fixed number of items and you want to know when your items will be completed. So in that case, how much time would it take to process a backlog comprised of 100 items? And then again, you have ranges. So that will help you see where you are the most likely to complete a backlog. And that really creates a really deep conversation regarding risk with the consumers of the work, because then you're actually enabling your consumer to choose what amount of risks they are willing to take. Okay, if you say, okay, I will have everything done mid-October, okay, with an 85% chance to complete those items, then if they say we want to be ready for a trade show in September, then in that case you are at below 50. So how risk averse are they to actually commit to that kind of date? Okay, that is based on your actual history. So, and how you can actually pull back on the date and see if you can deliver earlier, then maybe it would be to see how many items you can get by that time. So you'd go back to the other chart and see how far you'll go to through the backlog and make choices that will help the consumer meet their objectives. Okay, it's all about conversation. Okay, and the conversation is really rich when you have ranges and percentages, and you are also putting perspectives that we are in this together, and we are making decision based on probabilities.
And sorry, real quick, it looks like Joel has a question.
Yeah, actually more of an add-on to that about the flow basis. I know when I first started doing things this way, I was really pushing on the analytic side of the question about is everything the same size? In other words, is this really valid? So I have an interesting exercise you might want to try with some of your teams.
In
What
fact,
actually is the size distribution of items in your team? You might be surprised how narrow that size distribution really is. Many
Yeah.
times when I've plotted it, people say, oh, we have all different sizes, but you have a chart that's like this, and they're all like 3s or 5s with a few outliers, in which
yes,
case
like
this
in this case
concern
over here.
about it being different sizes is like, it's not real. So that's all.
Mhm.
Just wanna-
Yes, that you basically have front-loaded curves. Most of the time, that's the behavior that you will observe. And sometimes you'll have some camel bumps. And in
Right.
those cases, it may help you identify different SLAs.
Understood. I guess I was preemptively trying to help a bit with the thing that's, oh, well, they're not all the same size, so this won't work for me, which actually you'll be amazed, I think, how many times it does.
Especially if your system is stable.
Exactly. It kind
mhm.
of doesn't matter. The averages are where the averages are. So I hope that helps.
And if you want to win over people using that kind of tools, one thing that you can do to help is to simulate the present. Okay, meaning that you, let's say, remove the past 2 or 3 months from history, and you use the data that dates a bit more, and you try to simulate the present and see how well you do. Okay, so that way you can help see how credible the tool is and how close it comes to real situations. When it comes to the key artifacts of the PI planning, like the program board, the art board, in that case, the Kanban team, you want them to only reveal the fixed date items. Okay, there are different classes of service in Kanban, like you have standard, fixed date, expedite, and so on. And in that case, those features that you're working on, they might not, let's say you might not want to have each of them committed to a fixed date. You want to keep some flexibility, but those who are expecting deliverables from you and they do need to commit on certain dates, then you can help them manage their risks by making yourself a commitment on a fixed date item and use your SLA to find when is the best moment to start the work item. Okay, and there are cases where it can be pretty late in the PI, because if you work on those items too early, you will increase the cost of delay of the other items that are not required for the dependency. Okay, that could flow much faster and come out of the system earlier. So that is why it is important to use the SLA, not only to see how early you can start, but also see how late, so that you're not increasing the wait times for items that could be done earlier if the dependency is not required early in the PI. Then I think it will go back to Joe's question regarding how they commit to the objectives and if they do use the PI objectives. In fact, the Kanban teams, they do use PI objectives as well. It's just that they will phrase them in different ways using information they have in their system. Okay. You may use a rule of thumb in your team that any objectives that are based on throughput, you may want to have them at a level of confidence of 85% so that you commit to them. And those who are below, let's say 70%, then those would be your uncommitted objectives. You may also have objectives for single items that you then have fixed date on. And I like to have SLA related objectives so that you commit to maintain an SLA. So if there are changes during the PI, you've advertised your SLA as a PI objectives as well. So the key consideration, it really comes down to what kind of teams we are talking about. You may have a Kanban team who's a delivery team, actually creating features that are part of the product and they align with all the other teams, and they often have to commit to large batches, as opposed to support team or service teams that will have a continuous work intake. So in that case, it makes little sense to commit on large batches. It would be more a matter of committing to fixed date single items and commitment to an SLA, a level of service. So the work intake patterns will really segregate the different behaviors of the teams. Also, if you are part of a support team, you may want to have two separate SLAs, one for incident and one for problem solving, as those might have their consumers have completely different expectations. Okay, so this is something that you keep in mind and measure and advertise accordingly. Integrating with Kanban teams. So in that part, we are past the PI planning and we are working together on the delivery of value. We go back to our Kanban system. We'll define it piece by piece, see how the game is played and how it plays out throughout the PI. We're using the columns and the swim lanes over here that you see for different stages of the process. And those swim lanes often are related to the classes of service, the most common being expedite, fixed date, and standard. Expedite meaning that you basically break all the rules and get that piece of work out of the system as soon as possible. Fixed date items do have fixed date commitments to meet, and standard are normal items that you do want to complete as soon as possible, but according to the system policies. Okay, so that's what you're after in your Kanban system. And like I've mentioned a bit earlier, this is your game. This is your game of Monopoly or Catan and so on. So you're playing this game together. This is how you operate on the day-to-day. When it comes to board design, it's really, I see a question from Kelly. Expedite doesn't adhere to WIP limits. Okay, so you might break the WIP limits on columns to have the work proceed faster to the system. What I've seen in the field, though, is to have a WIP limit on the expedite row. You only have one expedite at a time, so that the team is all hands on deck to get that thing out. When it comes to design a board for flow, is to explicitly show the queues. So if there are wait states in your system, making these states visible through waiting queues that often have the title ready. This is a great way to show where the work is piling up. Make sure that you document and that you socialize your policy. Okay, different policies that describe what are the rules for the cards to move from one row to another. Okay, having consistent policies and have them applied in a continuous manner really help the flow. That really help because if you actually have different expectations of what is the state of the work item in the given column, and you end up breaking that contract, then you will destabilize your flow. Okay, because the consumer of one step cannot make assumptions on the state of the work item when they start working on it. So if you are consistent both in the definition and the application of your policies, it will be really predictable for the workers in what state the work items are when they are in a given column and how confidently they can start working on it. One also thing really important is to use a walk the board approach for your team sync. So when you're looking at your Kanban board during your daily team sync, or in some Kanban teams, they do it twice or thrice a week. You use the board rather than doing a roundtable approach, having everybody have their say on what they're doing, but you rather look at the board itself and synchronize around the work. Different class of service, I've covered a bit earlier, the 3 most popular. So you can see, and that's the most common way to represent them. And one challenge that I see in the design of Kanban boards is that people tend to use multiple concepts to illustrate a single thing. So using a swim lane for blocked is a practice that I deeply discourage because in most modern tools, there are flags on the work items so that you see which item are blocked, and they typically change colors in your visual tools. So if you use both the flag and the swim lane, then you've used 2 visual cues to share the exact same information. Here you have the waiting states that we covered a bit earlier, how it looks in your board. So that way you really implement a pull system, because you signal to the consumers in the next step in which item are ready to be pulled and worked on. And also you signal to your colleagues upstreams if you're ready to pull new work or not, as this column will pile up if your throughput doesn't allow you to pull any more work. So you're really good to see where bottlenecks are in the system just by looking how the ready column is piling up. It's also really important to have WIP limits on ready column as well, so that's it doesn't pile up to the infinite, so that you're managing your queues. Document policies. So there are many ALM tools that allow you to document your pull policy directly in the columns of your Kanban board. I advise you to use it if you have access to that kind of feature. It's really fun because you have access to this information all the time. Every time you work with your board, you can access this information and make sure that you are consistent in the use of your policies. Team sync, this is the typical agenda that SAFe recommends. That's common sense, reviewing how work is flowing, peer review of the WIP, review next step story into the baseline, discuss improvement to the process. If you can make some changes to make sure the flow works better, reorganize as a team to help achieve better flow, and monitor fixed date commitments. Make sure that you don't miss on those. Walking the board approach. This is an approach that I really enjoy using, is to have the Kanban team walk the board backwards. Okay. That's one thing that really helps focusing on getting more work out and then pulling the work forward, rather than walking the board from left to right and have the tendency to push the work forward. Okay, so by walking the board backwards, you look at the items, you look at the flow time versus SLA, you take a look at the exit policies to make sure that we are really aligned, really helpful, and it helps you put yourself in a mindset where you pull the work. Okay. Relentlessly improving on the Kanban system. So by that point, you've reached the end of the PI, you are in the IP iteration, and you'll start to engage in the inspect and adapt activities. So before we move to the question, I think there's a question.
I do have a question. This is Abhishek.
Yes.
Wanted to understand the real value of having a WIP limit to a ready state, because there we are not doing anything. That's just a repository of all the completed work.
You mean on which column would you not use a WIP limit?
The build has a in progress and a ready state, and both of them have a a WIP limit, wanted to understand the value of adding the WIP limit for a ready state, as this would just be a repository for all the completed work. Even if we don't have a WIP, we can store infinite number of work item that can be pulled only when the integrate and test have a bandwidth.
But let's take a step backward and see how this Kanban system was designed in the first place. So the system was designed so that a done item is taken from the backlog and is accepted after it is integrated in test. So the flow time that we are measuring is from starting the analysis, pulling it from the backlog to have this item accepted. And if we have no WIP limit on the wait state, the ready column after build, then we're piling up items that will be in the waiting state, and they will grow older and degrade our flow time for the entire system, because we're consistently clogging the system rather than helping pull forward. Okay.
Makes sense. Thank you.
I do say question, what type of artwork would you consider for Kanban teams syncing with Scrum teams? I'll work for the art teams. Publishing item, documentation items. The example I was sharing regarding the PI objectives was a localization team that would be on part of a larger solution working in Kanban. So even though their items are not IT related items, then those people would commit to the deliverable of their process. So their Kanban board will most likely be different than the one we see typically in IT development teams. But that would work as well also. Okay, relentlessly improve with Kanban teams. So at this point, we have reached the end of the PI. We will do the metrics review, perform the problem-solving workshop, and also be leveraging the flow accelerators that have been introduced recently to SAFe framework. So when you show up at the metrics review during the Inspect and Adapt event, you also use the same actual business value chart as the other teams are doing. You have committed yourself to those objectives. Reporting on how you did in terms of SLA, okay, and also making sure that you get your charts ready for the problem-solving workshop. Those would be precious inputs to help you actually improve, and in those areas where facts are your friends. So using your flow time histogram and using your flow load, your cumulative flow diagram as key inputs for the process. So here we have a flow time histogram example. And like I've mentioned a bit earlier, the common behavior to that kind of curve, the common distribution that you will see is a front-loaded curve. So you have the items being more frequent on the left-hand side of the chart, but you may see camel bumps in your distribution. And then you can do a more detailed analysis on these items, try to figure out what's going on, what is a common cause for this cluster of item, and is there something we can do about it? Maybe it's something that we can't change, or maybe it's related to a technology challenge. So some of the items might be in another technology that take a bit more time to make changes, or in a legacy part of the system that's a bit more complex. So any work items related to that part of the solution might have a higher SLA. Okay, so those are things that you can look at, but don't take the chart at face value. You use it as clues to make hypothesis, and then do a detailed analysis on this. Yes, just mentioned in the chat that some of the participants have the same experience with this chart. Here you have a cumulative flow diagram. There are, let's say, two main families of cumulative flow diagram. If you look at some of the ones that are produced based only on snapshot of item numbers, you will see nosedives on the curves. Okay, that means that there are items actually disappearing from the flow. It's reflected by having those curves going down. Okay, so you might have someone on the organization, some senior leaders who have decided to pivot on a certain initiative, and that result in work items being canceled no matter where they lied in the pipeline. So they've disappeared from the chart. There is another school of thought, the one that is used by Daniel Vacanti and his literature and his tooling, that a CFD must never go down, always go flat or up. In that case, it makes the mathematics of flow work in a much simpler manner for all of the tooling and the analytics. But it means that if you have significant amount of items being canceled because the organization has pivoted from an initiative and canceled a bunch of work items, those items are just disappearing from history, and they will be absorbed in your flow, meaning that they will affect your stats, but they will not appear on the chart. So you'll have to figure out for yourself why you had a sudden fall in throughput at some point, because the items that were progressing in the system are not measured anymore and are not anymore part of any of your statistics. Using the same feedback loop as the art, since you're actually part of the art, it is natural for you to align on the same cadences. And on those cadences, when you're learning about your system, you can challenge your own SLA, you can challenge your own batch size, and also use COPs that you have in place where you can actually socialize your metrics and your ways of working, so that other teams, even though they are not Kanban teams, Scrum teams can also take advantage of all the flow practices that you put into place. Tips for items getting done: track your SLA like any other items. And I saw in the chat a bit earlier that some folks are using the untangible class of service for improvement. So having an extra swim lane for improvement items is something that can be really helpful to create time and space for improvement. And that is especially useful if you are not performing cadence-based retrospectives. Okay, that way, that swim lane is the way that you create time and space for improvement. And to ensure you do have time and space for that, make sure that in your policy, in your board policies, that you actually commit to complete some of those within your cycle or within an SLA as well. Back to the flow properties, just a quick reminder, we'll be using some of those terminology when discussing the did I draw on my screen by accident? First time I see that. Just stop sharing. Pretty weird. Is it me who drawn on the screen, or?
Possibly not. I think it is a Zoom feature, but I'm trying to see if we can clear that out.
Okay, it's a bit in the way, but I think we can keep moving forward. Okay, so I see this participant, I guess, that are drawing.
Yeah. I will, I'll see what I can do about that if you want to continue.
Yes, so I'll just, I see that anybody can draw the screen, so it's pretty weird. Okay. So those are the 8 flow accelerators that have been added to SAFe and are especially have a special place in the framework since version 6.0. I've highlighted those that we will discuss a bit more today, as they are related to different strategies that I would like to share with you. So addressing the different bottlenecks that you have in your system, you can make them visible by having multiple wait states in the system. So if you see work piling up in the state, you're most likely ahead of a bottleneck. Tracking time in the wait states is pretty useful as well. And when you are running value stream workshops, paying extra attentions to the section that is downstream of a wait state that's clogging up, that's a great way to make sure you go to the root cause of the problem. Working in smaller batches, one way you can work on your Kanban system to naturally improve on that topic is to challenge your SLA and set lower sizing standards. Okay, so by having lower sizing standards, even at the work item level, you are lowering the batch size of your item and will help create a better flow. You can set improvement standards as well, okay, so that you may want to have the SLA you commit to and have an objective to reduce this SLA. And one thing you can do as well is to use shorter work intake cycles. Okay, what I mean by that is that in the case you are feeding your Kanban system in cycles, just like the Scrum teams would feed with iterations. Maybe you could either have your work intake being weekly or daily, so that you have smaller batches that are in flight in your to-do items. Reducing queue length, one thing that also might be really useful and is a bit counterintuitive, is to allow the team to take work at their local level. Okay, so if you have a Kanban teams that are only taking work from the art backlog, that means that any items that are outside of that backlog and that should be done by that team would have to wait for the next PI to be done. And that can be really problematic, because you would have queues sitting in front of your art for an entire PI. So by keeping some of your capacity for a local work input, then you may have work items that flow into your system during the PI, and that avoids the creation of a large queue in front of the art. But to make sure that you maintain your art commitments, make sure that you have clear work intake policies to make it clear how your local work intake works. Remediate legacy policy. Just like I mentioned a bit earlier, your Kanban system is the game you're playing on the daily basis. You don't cheat, okay? If you have to cheat the game to get the work done, it means that your game is broken. Okay, and a broken game means you have policies that are obsolete and need to be updated or to be removed. Okay, and legacy policy doesn't always mean 10 years old. Okay, those are typical waterfall challenges that you meet that are policies that can hurt your system. But it can be a policy that you set for yourself like a year or 6 months ago, and that your team has evolved, and you may not need this policy anymore. So be ready to challenge your own policies, not only the traditional ones. Okay, so if there are rules that you can't follow, sometimes it is the rules that are broken. So make sure that you update them if you need be. So by looking into this, Kanban teams actually help create flow at all level. Okay. That means that as a Kanban team, you can help your art do better, and you can help also the entire ecosystem do better if you use, by example, the local work intake policy to ensure that you're not creating queues outside of your art that hurt the system. Further readings. So in addition to using the SAFE framework, I also had a chance to meet and attend a class with Daniel Vacanti. I've read his material. This is really great material to look at, to really challenge your own knowledge and assumptions regarding flow metrics. This material is really, really valuable. There are some tricks and tweaks that you need to take into account when you're using this information in the context of an art, because there are design choices in the same framework that come from the queue management theory. So that might look counterintuitive if you look at a pure Kanban perspective. So if you want to have a complete understanding of the system, I'd suggest you also look at Donald Reynoldson book on product development flow. And I think we've reached a Q&A.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I kind of wanted to travel back up in the chat. We did have a couple questions that I don't think we got to. One from Derek was, does anyone have a recommendation on usage of goals and objectives with a standalone Kanban team, not a part of an art, since they are not time bound? So do you have any thoughts on that, Eric?
The time bound feature of SAFE comes from the constraints of the queuing theory. Okay, so that's how I come to it. I do find it useful as it speaks to the senior stakeholders a lot. So I would still use them as a tool for conversation.
Got it. Thanks. And there was a discussion about Kanban University replacing SLA with SLE in their Kanban Management Professional Certification material. Do you have any thoughts on that, on SLAs versus SLEs and labeling language?
I think that it doesn't matter much. What I think matters the most is that within a single system, you pick one terminology and you keep it. That's how I would come to it, because it speaks also to the same conversation at the Scrum level between the difference between a commitment and a forecast. Okay, one is a bit softer than the other, but even if the word is softer, you will have sometimes hard expectation from the consumers. So
got it. Okay, thanks. We also had a question about how you can use the info from the cumulative flow diagram example slide. Like, do you have any examples of it in action?
In fact, I do use the different charts that you get from the tools to make hypothesis on what's happening in the system. So in the case of a CFD, you can see one of the layers really ballooning, becoming thicker and thicker. That really speaks to the idea of there's a bottleneck downstream of that stage. If there are stages that are flat line, then that means there's no flow at all. So it's really a matter of telling story with the graphs and have those stories being tested with actual facts, because those are just hypotheses until you've reached out to the people and validate with them if it's actually the case.
Okay, great, thanks. We also had a question about priorities, and there was a comment that I would imagine from Matt that I would imagine a Kanban team has dynamic inflow.
Not always, it depends. Kanban is being more and more popular. Sometimes it's chosen as a way of working for its simplicity and its quality rather than requirements on work intake. So I wouldn't be hardball on that one.
Okay, fair enough. And Avishek asks, what would you recommend about estimating work items in Kanban?
Right sizing. I mean, you look back at the history of your team, if you happen to have any, you look at what the distribution curve looks like, and given the ranges you come up with, you can set yourself objectives of SLA that would be fit for purpose for your consumer. And then you start feeding the system items that are right-sized for your SLA.
So you are here implying by right sizing is ensuring that they are equally sized so that
they are under SLA.
Okay.
If you are confident that they are under your SLA, you have estimated enough.
Got it. Got it.
Okay, and thanks for that answer. So we had a question from John of what are the most important takeaways about the differences between SAFe 5 and SAFe 6 that can help us with the SAFe upgrade quiz from 5 to 6? Important difference, like what are the important differences to understand?
Yeah, just for Kanban.
Just for the Kanban part, I would say that the flow accelerators are pretty much universal. Okay, any types of team, that's something that you definitely want to look at. They have kind of branded their own Scrum and Kanban, called them SAFe Kanban and SAFe Scrum. So looking at the articles will show you how they, the terminology that they use for the Kanban system under SAFe 6. So that they are the two main articles, Team Kanban and Kanban in SAFe. What I find to be a well-guarded secret that we should talk a bit more is the local work intake that happens at every level. So that means at every level, your Kanban system can be fed with local policies. And that is part of the working in Kanban in SAFe. Don't remember the exact article, but that one, I find it really insightful on creating flow at every level of the system. Another idea that I find really useful is the introduction of the team coach, meaning that every teams at every level would have great advantages working with team coaches and with teams that are a bit higher in the framework. So namely solutions or portfolio teams at those levels. The team coach, I'd rather use a lean coach than an agile coach sometimes. Okay, and have more flow conversation rather than sticking to the agility itself.
All right, thanks, Eric, for that answer. So we are coming up on time. I think we'll have enough time for one more question, but before that, I am going to post the sponsors and board elections material that I had mentioned earlier. So I just posted that in the chat. Check that out. So our final question from Nydia, how are external dependencies and waiting time factored in while Kanban features are planned in for a PI?
You're chaining SLAs, and that way it becomes complex if you have chaining dependencies. If you have one at a time, SLA is good enough to manage a risk, but chaining them, meaning that you actually multiply the risk. So it can be cumbersome sometimes if you have too many dependencies.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Eric. I will give you a moment here to wrap up. I'll give you some time to wrap up here in just a moment, but the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. You can simply Google YouTube channel for Agile Austin and find that. Hopefully have that up by the end of the day today, post that link back to the meetup. So I wanted to thank Eric for coming and also the audience for all of your great questions. And so Eric, I'll hand it over to you to wrap up.
Excellent. So thank you all. It's been a great moment. I feel highly fortunate to be to have been invited by this community and to share with you. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and keep the conversation moving forward.
Yes. Thanks so much, Eric. Really appreciate it. Appreciate everyone's time. We'll be back with you next month, same time, same channel. All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.